You are listening to Stribling's New York on WOR Radio 710 AM on your digital dial. If you have any questions about our show, contact our producer, Tony Simone, tsimone at stribling.com, TSIMONE at stribling, STRIBLING.com. We have a great array of authors today. Amazingly, two who have passed my subway test, which is when I worked for People magazine. If I ever read a book that made me miss my subway stop, I would really herald the book. And at that time, when I was doing those reviews, I had Frederick Forsyth and Robert Crace, who will be on later in the show. And it just happened to me now this week with Alex Berenson, who is joining us. Now, Alex brings to me a remarkable authenticity to his books. He was a reporter for the New York Times. He covered topics ranging from the occupation of Iraq to the flooding of New Orleans to the financial crimes of Bernie Madoff. To me, he writes with an authenticity that's reminiscent of author Lawrence Sanders, who was really big in the 80s, and who was a former crime reporter for the Newark Star-Ledger, and he was known as Mr. Bestseller. And Alex has had quite a few New York Times bestsellers already, and he's joining us. So welcome, Alex.
Rob, thanks for having me on.
So I'm reading The Wolves right now, and I'm going to be honest, not lying. I'm at the very, very end, and it's really gripping. It's a page turner. When I talked about authenticity, what I find really compelling about your writing is you have a scene at a baccarat table in Macau, and there's a Chinese general who's playing baccarat. And in anybody else's hands, it would just be a mundane thing. And I just was turning the pages and couldn't get enough of it. How do you do it?
Well, thank you. Well, I try to live the scenes in my mind as much as I possibly can. And I try, and that character, he's obviously a very troubled guy and a dangerous guy. And I try, even when I'm writing those people, those villains, I try to make them as real as I can and try to see things through their eyes as much as I can, because everybody, even people who commit the most heinous crimes have a story they tell themselves about what they're doing and why. And, a fiction writing, the great thing about it is you can get inside other people's heads or imagine what it's like to be inside other people's heads and tell that story.
Well, as a fellow journalist, I love watching people and studying people and seeing their behavior. And I've spent plenty of time in Vegas casinos, and I'm fascinated by the characters there. And you really got the gambler's mentality. But more, you've written something far and above that. It's interesting because this summer I interviewed Nelson DeMille, whose book Radiant Angel has the Russians as villains. I don't know. I don't want to get into any plot spoilers here, but you've written an international, we should call it an international thriller in The Wolves? How would you describe it?
Sure. I mean, in some ways, it's a continuation of the previous two books of The Counterfeit Agent and 12 Days, and it brings the culmination of the hero, John Wells, and his sort of long-standing fight with a guy who's tried to lure the United States into war with Iran, named Aaron Duberman, and Duberman is the one who owns all these casinos, but the Russians and the Chinese get involved. And one of the themes in the book is that as powerful and mighty as Duberman is, he has sort of unleashed all these forces that he can't quite control with his plan and with its failure. And suddenly he's prey and not predator. And whether or not he can get out of that and what he'll have to do to himself to get out of that is really the crux of the book, and whether Wells can bring him down.
Well, okay, and another question I had immediately as soon as I started reading the book and seeing the Aaron Duberman character, is this a Romana Clef? Is he supposed to be Sheldon Adelson? Or
Sheldon makes an appearance in the book, so Aaron can't be Sheldon.
But or an amalgamation of him? Yes, I know he does. You mentioned him in one line, but it reminded me of Sheldon Adelson in a way because he's an extreme Zionist.
Yes, I mean, and he's undone by his love of Israel, and I do, and look, Sheldon Adelson is not Aaron Duberman. Let me make that clear.
Okay.
Any libel lawyers out there? That's
sorry. Everybody, just sue me. Sue our producer, Tony Simone, at tsimone@stribling.com.
But I do think it's fascinating that in the real world, that Sheldon, and Sheldon is not financing a conspiracy to lure the United States into war with Iran. Let me be clear about that too. But in the real world, Sheldon, who loves Israel and who is, he's a committed Jew, he unfortunately plays into every stereotype of sort of Jewish power and Jewish control that anti-Semites have ever had. And I think his efforts have backfired. He appears to want to control the presidential election. He makes Republican candidates come and kiss his ring. He's now bought a newspaper in Las Vegas and sort of is using it for his own purposes. There's a tragedy in Sheldon Adelson, and in some ways that's what I'm trying to capture with the character of Aaron Duberman, even though they are not the same person.
Okay, so with the book, another thing that's interesting is your character John Wells, former CIA operative, and the hero is a Muslim, a converted Muslim,
yeah.
And he's an American, and you're a writer, you're Jewish. So how did this come about?
So the story of John Wells is that John Wells was in Afghanistan before September 11th, and he failed to stop September 11th. He was in as an agent for the CIA infiltrating Al Qaeda, and that event sort of changed his life forever. And he decided that he was going to stay in Afghanistan and in Pakistan for as long as necessary until the jihadis trusted him. And so he spent years over there before they sent him back to the United States. And that's the story of The Faithful Spy, which is the first of his novels, which came out several years ago. I can't believe it, but the 10th anniversary of The Faithful Spy will be this year. But so Wells, while he was over there, had sort of no choice but to convert to Islam. And somewhat to his own surprise, he found that he likes the religion. He's not, he's not somebody who's ever going to take faith easily. But there are things about Islam that ring more true to him than Christianity. And he was born and raised Christian. So he's an interesting character. I think 10 years ago, people were very interested in him. I think, unfortunately for me, some of the people who read these books they're just frustrated with Islam. Right? They're frustrated with radical Islam. They're frustrated with what seems like unending terrorist attacks. And some of those people, I get regular emails saying, "Can you please convert him back to Christianity?" Seriously, or here's why he should convert back, or I'm not going to read the books anymore because he's Muslim. And I think that's unfortunate. There are heroes of all religions.
Well, I suggest that everybody get a copy of The Wolves, and I don't know if we have to read the books in sequence. We're running out of time here, but I really love your writing, and I'm going to start going back and reading the other books. I don't know how I've missed them, considering I have been reviewing books for the last 20 years, but I'm glad that I finally got connected to you and your work. Alex Berenson, author of The Wolves and many other books, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Rob.